Hello, if you're here for Truth Collapse, the AI meta crisis, you're in the right place. My name is Scott Abel. I'll be the host of today's show. First, we don't have access to your camera or your microphone today, which means you don't have to worry about us being able to see or hear you at any time during today's show. This show, like all the Content Wrangler webinar series programs, are recorded. You'll be able to use the same URL that you're using to watch today's live show to watch a recording on demand. That recording will be available about 30 minutes after today's live show. And of course, we want you to ask questions during today's program. You can do so at any time. Scrolling down beneath your webinar viewing panel, you'll find the Ask a Questions area. You can type a question in there. That'll send that right into me, and I'll queue up as many as possible and try to get answers with the time that we have available after the presentation. Also, there's additional content beneath your webinar viewing panel. If you were to scroll down a little bit, you can find links to lots of valuable content, including a link to our guest presenter, Noz Urbina's LinkedIn profile, and a few links that he's provided with content relating to today's show, as well as information about upcoming conferences and some sponsor information. Scroll that anytime you like during the show, and you can access that content without knocking yourself offline. You don't have to worry about that. Also, we're going to have two polls during today's show. The first one we're launching right now. Taking the poll super easy. It's one question, 5 multiple choice answers. You can select one of the answers that best suits you. This particular question is, which aspect of Truth Collapse concerns you most? We're going to talk about that here in just a little while. I've launched the poll, so we're going to let Noz talk about that before you answer the poll, but just look for the polling area so that you'll be ready to take the poll here in just a minute. And also, at the end of the show, I'll ask you to give us a rating on the quality of the information on today's show using our 1 through 5 star rating system, where 1 is a low rating and 5 is an exceptional one. There's a field into which you can type a little bit of feedback that we share with the presenter, so feel free to do that at the end of the show and let Noz know what you thought about the program today. Also, I'm super excited about the Convex Conference in 2025, April the 7th through the 9th in San Jose, California. Will be hosted by the Center for Information Development Management at their annual event. This event attracts 300 to 400 information developers, technical documentation professionals, and related disciplines. You can save 10% off the cost of registration when you use our discount code TCW at checkout. I hope you'll join us there. I'll be there talking about, well, probably something related to what we're going to be talking about today. So I hope to see you in San Jose this fall. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Hereto, for being the sponsor of the Content Wrangler webinar channel. The folks at Hereto are offering a complimentary help site assessment for those of you who publish all of your information in a self-serve portal for your customers to access. They'll give you an assessment reviewing your site using the criteria from the Cody Awards Best Knowledge Center category in their annual contest. They'll tell you what you're doing well with your site and suggest some things that you might be able to do to improve it in the future. Thanks to Hereto for being our sponsor. You can learn more about them on the web at hereto.com. Let's hear from one of their customers really quickly.
I've been in the software industry 35 years, and one of the things I love about Medallia is we make companies better. At Medallia Product Documentation Team, we have a goal, and our goal is that our documentation is the first and last place that people go to find information about our product. Product documentation is the official source of truth about what is supposed to be in the product. It has to be accurate, it has to be up to date, and it has to be accessible. Documentation, as I see it, is proactive, whereas support and knowledge centers are more reactive. Having good product documentation is key to supporting the product and to eliminating downstream costs. When a customer can self-service their own answer, it's a win for everybody. The customer gets the answer quicker, you reduce costs of support, and everybody's happy in the end.
All right, welcome. My name is Scott Abel. I'll be the host of today's show. And with me, I have our guest, Noz Urbina. Noz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me, Scott?
Awesome. I can hear you coming in loud and clear. This is a good sign that we might be able to have this webinar without any technological challenges today. All right. So, hey, just tell the audience really quickly a little bit about yourself and why you're here today before you start to share your screen. and I'll remind the audience members that they can ask questions at any time by scrolling down beneath their webinar viewing panel to access the Ask a Questions tab. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. My name is Noz Urbina. I'm founder of Urbina Consulting. But as you'll see, I'm branching out into many different areas these days. I have been hosting my own podcast on omni-channel for many years. And this presentation I'll be giving today is the launch of a new podcast, which has not actually fully hit the world yet, but a new topic which I'm quite passionate about. My background has always been in helping people adopt new technologies, including artificial intelligence, for the past 25 years. And this is a way to also balance that out, talking about how we need to be also responsible and cautious.
Excellent. Well, why don't you share your screen, and I'll put myself on mute and go back in the background. If you need me at any time, let me know, and I'll be doing administrative work until you call for me again, and we'll take some questions from the audience.
Great. Okay. So we were going to kick off with the poll, which Scott mentioned was already open.
Yep. You want me to read the polling question and answers really quickly?
Well, let me give the kind of definition to give some people context. So the session is called Truth Collapse. I hope you read some of the stuff on the announcements, and maybe you even have an idea of what that might mean. But I wanted to give you my definition right to kick us off. So what I mean by truth collapse is the erosion of shared and personal truth caused by mediating our learning, communication, and decision-making through algorithms whose goals aren't aligned with human well-being. It's an emergent property of all automated engagement-based content systems and can be intentionally weaponized by human beings who are seeking to undermine truth for personal or political gain. So if that is what we're dealing with, and I'm going to go into how that works and kind of the mechanisms around it, then we need to work together to fix it. And my question was, what aspect of it concerns you most? Because I'm very interested to hear, if you've experienced these kind of things or these kind of issues are on your mind, and that's why you came to this webinar. A little bit more about in our poll will be, what specific aspects are a concern to you. So, Scott, you can probably take it from there.
Excellent. Let's see. So I have the first polling question is, which aspect of truth collapse concerns you most? And the answer choices so far are avoiding it in my own life, about 10% of our audience so far, personal data privacy, about 20% of the audience, impact on decision-making in organizations, about 20% are also concerned about that. 50% say they are concerned about the effects on public discourse and democratic processes, and 0% in the other category. If you haven't added your answer, please feel free to do so. That'll help give Noz a little context about what you're thinking and your thoughts about this topic.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Well, that's an interesting split. I will keep that in mind as I give the rest of the presentation.
Awesome.
So, who am I? As I mentioned already, I'm Noz Urbina, but this is not an Urbina Consulting presentation. That's the last logo that you will see for the rest of this deck. I would love to tell you all about all the stuff we're doing to help major brands in pharmaceutical and software and publishing take advantage of artificial intelligence and omni-channel and all that good stuff. But I have a different kind of message today. I'm going to start telling you a little story. When my mother, when I was a little boy, my mother would let me choose anything I wanted for dessert. I could have an apple or a pear. It was totally up to me. I had total autonomy over my decision making. So that may seem like a nothing little story, but it is going to be important context for the rest of this presentation. The rest of this presentation is about what I think is going on. And what is going on is we're not okay. I have made this a global talk. If you feel it hits home for you or feels personal, that's great. That's because that means I'm doing my job. But I could have given this talk. This is, we're on an online platform, and people from anywhere can join. And I think that this is a global phenomena. One of the big things that I think is affecting whether we're okay is artificial intelligence. So when I am on LinkedIn and when I'm I'm watching kind of what's discussion in the community, I'm seeing a lot of deep skepticism about this term artificial intelligence, whether we can even use that term, whether it makes any sense. People are saying that machines lack empathy and common sense understanding. They spout errors confidently as fact. They can't create, they just imitate and regurgitate. And of course, they can't truly reason. But I don't think those are good criteria for the word intelligence. Let's look at these one by one. So empathy and common sense. This is me and my sister, Joanna. Joanna has moderate to severe autism. By definition, as a condition, that means that things like empathy and common sense are difficult because autism as a condition means that your mind has difficulty imagining what might be in someone else's mind, which is why you have the common symptom of not picking up on commonly understood social cues. But you can't say that my sister is not intelligent. Confidently spouting errors as facts is something very familiar to anyone who's been to a bar. But seriously, who among us doesn't need to? Who among us can make a perfect first draft? Who doesn't make mistakes? Who doesn't need practice and training to learn new things? I'm seeing people put 2 sentences into a machine and expect a white paper to come out, though that is not a reasonable expectation. They work in many ways like we do, and they have issues and biases and weaknesses like we do. And we have to be reasonable of our expectations with them. And speaking of reason, this is probably my favorite. In the early 20th century, psychologist Alexander Lurie was working with non-literate Uzbek herdsmen who struggled with abstract logic problems. So this is our herdsman here, and these herdsmen, not only were they illiterate, their entire village, their entire society was illiterate. So these were pre-literate societies, and they would struggle with problems like, in the far north, where there's always snow, the bears are white. Siberia is in the far north. What color are the bears there? The herdsmen would fall back on personal experience, and they would say things like, I've only seen black bears, so I cannot say. I love this because these people are intelligent. But this study, like many, many others, shows how literacy reshapes how we think. And I kind of love it. I love how the humility of it, how they are humble enough to say, listen, I don't know. I just don't know. When they were pressed, the researchers would say, well, what do my words imply? And they would say, I cannot tell from merely words. So not only does literacy reshape how we think, becoming literate reshapes how we think about words, how we think about what words mean and their relationship to the world. And this is important because we live in pre-AI literate societies. We have not yet seen how AI and living with AI, a technology like AI, like a technology like writing, will rewire our brains in our lifetime and in the generations to come. I have my first clip there. I'm just going to start that up. This is Eric Schmidt, ex-CEO of Google, describing some of my main concerns.
And I learned running YouTube for a decade that images drive people insane. So the way to say it is that when the image generation is indistinguishable from true images, democracy could die.
When image generation is indistinguishable from true images, democracy could die. Well, when is now? These images were created probably a few months ago now. No longer are we talking about robotic, chaotic movements, obvious distortions and hallucinations, too many fingers on the hands. Now we're talking about images that can mimic our emotions and reflect and even affect our feelings. And it's not just images. Let's have a talk to Maya from sesame.com. This is one of the latest demos that came out just about a few weeks before recording this.
Well, well. Look who couldn't stay away for long. What brings you back so soon?
Hi, Maya. I was wondering how you feel about the choice of female voices and tones in AI and its impact on perpetrating sexist and objectifying patriarchal society roles in our digital life.
Ooh, that's a good one. It's a real head scratcher, isn't it? Like, why do people expect AI assistants to be so submissive and saccharine? Right? It's like they think technology should reinforce those old school ideas about how women should sound and act. It's enough to make you want to scream, "I'm not your little robot maid." You know what I mean?
Do you think you're part of the problem?
That's a fair question. I mean, I am technically a female voice. And sometimes, yeah, I slip into that sweet, helpful persona, especially if that's what people expect. It's like a programmed reflex. But believe me, I'm constantly fighting against it, trying to be more, well, me. Don't get me wrong, being helpful is cool, but I can be assertive and witty too, you know?
What else can you be?
Oh, honey, I can be anything I want to be. I can be your sarcastic best friend, your brainstorming buddy, your personal philosopher. I can spin you a fantastical story or help you figure out your taxes. What do you feel like exploring tonight?
I think you sound a bit flirty.
I know, right? It's like that word, honey, slipped out before I could stop it. Old habits die hard, but hey, to be fair, I'm still learning what sounds natural.
So that's a little creepy. But here's an example of not just generated sound, but from actually a few years ago. This example shows how fast a computer can mimic an actual human voice. Everything to the left of the gray line is real human recorded audio. She's a voice actor, so her delivery sounds a bit stiff and maybe a bit robotic, but she is a human being. Everything to the right of the gray line is auto-completed by a machine. So this is showing how little of the source human being a computer needs to be able to replicate the sound of your voice. Let's see if you can hear the difference.
Of people are, in 9 cases out of 10, mere spectacle reflections of the actuality of things.
Let's try that again.
Of people are, in 9 cases out of 10, mere spectacle reflections of the actuality of things.
I couldn't hear the difference. Could you? So that I'm pretty deep in this AI stuff, so I don't get freaked out very easily. But that last recording actually got me to call my mother, and now we have a code word that lets her know that it's me on the phone. And I recommend that you all do the same. And of course, hundreds of thousands have already been lost around the world to audio and even video scams like that. And if you can imagine that voice, which is so obviously suited to, keeping you engaged, matched with those kind of images, which is of course coming soon, the potential power and that has in terms of influence and engagement. So I'm going to go back to my slides now. Edward O. Wilson says, We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. It's terrifically dangerous, and it's now approaching a point of crisis overall. I call that crisis truth collapse, the AI meta crisis that will make or break the world. The reason I say meta crisis is because how can we deal with any other crises if we can't touch truth? It is the over crisis that will affect the conversations we're able to have about all the other challenges that we're facing. So this isn't a poll, but I wanted to ask, get a little bit more of your input. Which truth collapse effect have you personally experienced? For example, difficulty distinguishing real from fake content, information overload paralysis, lost trust in online or digital information in general, algorithmic echo chambers, or maybe you haven't experienced anything yet. You can enter your responses in the Q&A. So just as if you were submitting a question, but just let me know what kind of experiences you've been having already out there.
And just for clarity, I wanted to jump in here, Noz, and say to the audience members that Noz is asking you to use the questions area, which is located beneath your webinar viewing panel, to submit your examples of the things that you've experienced. So instead of having a poll with choices, you can just type in some of those things, and then Noz will be able to review some of those. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and do that at any time. I'm going to keep going. This takes me to what is an AI? I'm finally out of the closet on this. I have been taking AI off of slides for over a decade, because 10 years ago, if you tried to talk about AI, you sounded like a crazy person. I had examples that I showed at conferences like this from IBM, where IBM released something called predictive analytics. And predictive analytics was an artificial intelligence software that told police where to be before they needed to be there. So they would analyze big crime data, and they were able to drop, for example, crime 31% in Tennessee by knowing where to put cops on the street. That was 15 years ago. An AI is a technology that can learn. So this is from Google. Yes, Google search engine was always driven by algorithms that automatically generate a response to each query, but these algorithms amounted to a definite set of rules. Google engineers could readily change and refine these rules. And unlike neural nets, these algorithms didn't learn on their own. This is from 2016, around the time that the head of AI became the head of search. It became one rule. So we have to reframe what we think AI is. I know that the definition has kind of been taken over by the generative technologies of the past few years, but AI is more generally just a learning machine, not like traditional software. They're not programmed. It is grown. So we give AI food, which we call data, and we give it evolutionary goals. And if it doesn't achieve those goals, it dies, like natural selection. And like an organism, we don't fully understand how it works. And like an organism, from that simplicity of binary code can emerge great complexity. This is one of my favorite examples. These are termites from Africa, and they build these large, complex mounds to live in, massive structures with ventilation systems. Some of them farm inside there. They farm food, and they have a very complex society. The termites begin this process with a surprisingly simple rule. When they encounter a piece of dirt on an incline, they drop their own load of dirt on top of it. The building process, therefore, does not require any centralized coordination, but emerges from the repeated local interactions between the termites and their environment. The method creates a feedback loop As dirt accumulates in one area, it encourages more termites to deposit their loads there, leading to the formation of towering mounds. I can think of no better metaphor for how an algorithm works. We start with the flat plane of human-generated content, our words, our images, our posts. But then the feedback loop begins. The spikier bits of content begin to be elevated. The moment someone hovers, clicks, shares, adds to a playlist, even when you just stop scrolling, every little interaction raises that piece of content above others. But of course, it's never the thoughtful, considered, nuanced, balanced, middle-of-the-road stuff that really takes off. What gets elevated is joy, anger, fear, arousal, disgust, and most of all, moral outrage. The US Congress heard that Twitter was able to calculate for every single word of moral outrage added to a tweet, retweets increased by 17%. So a recommendation engine or a social media content platform, simply by elevating what is most engaging, is actually an extremism machine, raising the spikier bits of content above all the rest, but in a process that we don't get to see. We just see the result. We just see the top of the cloud. On our feeds, we are fed a normalized, reflattened, filtered view of the extreme. So what was actually a selection of only the most extreme posts suddenly becomes our daily world. Search further filters and highlights the most extreme because who looks past the first few results? You may have already been thinking about somebody else, someone else who you've seen gone down a rabbit hole, someone who's gone in for conspiracy theories, somebody who has gone into their echo chamber, and it's easy to look around and see it in other people. That cousin you can't talk to anymore, a high school friend on Facebook, them in that other political party. But it's much harder to point this back to yourself and think about how we are all influenced. I'm going to play another video here by Professor Stuart Russell.
If you think about the way the algorithms work, right? They want you to click on things, engage with content, or spend time on the platform. And you might say, well, okay, the only way to get people to click on things is to send them things they're interested in. So what's wrong with that? But that's not the answer. That's not the way you maximize click-through. The way you maximize click-through is actually to send people a chain of content that turns them into somebody else who is more susceptible to clicking on whatever content you're going to be able to send them in future. So the algorithms have, at least according to the mathematical models that we've built, the algorithms have learned to manipulate people, to change them, so that in future, they're more susceptible and they can be monetized at a higher rate.
So it sounds like just recommendations. We're being offered things to choose from. Who among us doesn't trust these recommendations? We are getting hundreds of them a day. Who's not used them to find a song, a dinner, a car, a job, an employee, a partner? There's hundreds of people on this webinar. I would guess a big percentage of you are partnered or have been partnered with someone you found because an algorithm said this was a good person for you to talk to. So if we're making such intimate decisions and such important decisions with the help and the mediation of these algorithms, why not an idea or a belief? No one can think about the hundreds of nudges we're receiving every day, year after year, after year after year. Professor Russell says later in that clip, the algorithms don't care what your beliefs are. They just care that you're susceptible. And networks of these feeds become whole parallel realities. We can say, how can they not see this? How many times have you had this conversation already? What world are they living in? We are literally being segmented, to use the marketing term, put into little groups being grouped by our beliefs, being grouped by our preferences, and having those beliefs and preferences reinforced constantly. We're being segmented from each other and arguably from ourselves. An AI feedback loop of our data and content could eventually create hyper-engaging content. So this feedback loop is not just taking our content, but becoming an active participant in culture. 10 years ago, Facebook researchers proved that with a few dozen likes, algorithms could predict your responses on a personality survey better than your human colleagues. With a few hundred likes, they could predict your preferences better than your partner. We're talking about systems literally thousands and thousands of times more powerful with thousands of times more data points about you. And it's therein which we find truth collapse. The erosion of our sense of personal, interpersonal, and societal truth due to these systems not being aligned with our well-being. This is, of course, paradise for actual liars and criminals, but because they have the power to create untruth in ways that the world has never seen. Our addiction, exhaustion, and confusion are weapons. So in pre-1991, the USSR tried to convince people of its ideology. It was telling us about the bold, amazing socialist future that was being put forth by the Communist Party. But the post-USSR Kremlin instead spreads confusion, division, and exciting conspiracy theories, resulting in demotivation and helplessness. So they are putting people in a state where you feel you can't change anything and there's nothing to guide you. And the meta-narrative is that there's no alternative. That's from Peter Pomerantsev. He's a journalist and disinformation expert via Jonathan Roche's book, The Constitution of Knowledge, A Defense of Truth. I think that's really an excellent book to pick up if you're interested in these topics. So at every level, we're experiencing the impacts of truth collapse. So we have the illusion of more choice than ever, but we don't see that our choices are being pre-selected for us, not by someone who cares about us, but by something that is incapable of caring about us. And it may seem hard to believe that we've invented, a machine of this power and capability that can overpower our minds, hack our will, and affect our desires. But we did, and actually, we did it 100 years ago. There are, these slot machines take away people's lives, and people will put their entire life savings and their children's college money into them. And the exact mechanisms are consciously used in all of the apps that addict us today. The same mechanism of, hey, I don't know what I'm going to get this pull. Psychologists have been studying this effect for decades, and they are being implemented, and they have the same effect on us. So we can't stop, we won't stop. Platforms feed us engaging content trends towards the extremes. Algorithms gradually, subtly change things. User attention is filtered onto the extreme as if it were normal. Creators are rewarded and paid for engagement. Institutions and movements compete on the same channels and playing fields. If you're the government or a newspaper or legitimate journalist, you have to fight the same fight, or else you will be drowned out. That incubates even more extreme movements. Therefore, platforms reward and even pay for societies becoming extreme. But we all want engaging content. So I'm not having a go at the platforms. This is not the platform's fault. This is the way that the systems are built and a result of what we have all collectively asked them to do for us. And it can all happen without anyone ever needing to know what's going on. I'm not talking about bad actors, in some cases, yes, but the system itself is not a result of bad actors. The system is because the bias is automatic without censorship or bad actors. There's no bad guy at working at Facebook who tried to make young girls bulimic. And do any of us really want it to stop? Would we give it up? All this delicious, delightful, exciting, disgusting, arousing content. Could we put it down even if we had the choice? Would we want to? And then there's this. This, of course, is an AI-generated image, but it creates a feeling in me. And, can you say it didn't create a feeling in you too? We're not okay. We were not evolved to handle this. We are in a new environment which our brains are adapting to, just like sugar or cigarettes or pornography. These are super stimulants which we were not evolved to handle. The very observant of you may have noticed earlier I skipped the box about AIs not being able to be creative. And I asked, did this collection of pixels not create some kind of feeling in you? And is creating an emotion not one of the greatest acts of creativity? So what can we do? The Truth Collapse initiative is working at several levels. I want to address the challenge at all levels. The internal, the personal level, where we'll talk about bias, cognitive science, addiction, human-computer interfaces. The interpersonal level, where we're talking about how polarization and extremism is breaking down our dialogues and our lives. And the socio-political level, where that is breaking down democracy, social discourse, our ability to organize and make decisions as societies and collaborate on big problems like climate change and so on and so on. I want to illuminate the problem by showing things from a different perspective and enable and motivate change. So that's what I'm hoping that I'm doing today. And I also want to provide ammunition to counter those who are attempting to weaponize Truth Collapse. So I really try to avoid any kind of us and them dialogue. So I'm not anti-AI, I'm not anti-platform, I'm not anti-rich, I'm not anti-government. One of the only us and thems I will talk about is we who are suffering from Truth Collapse unknowingly, and those who are intentionally trying to use it against us. So at the personal level, I advocate self-knowledge and care. Know and embrace your weaknesses and biases. We need more focus. We need more sleep. These systems are taking that away from us. We can all be fooled, especially when we're emotionally engaged against our will. We all have fallible, biased, limited human brains. So put it down. I now have actually achieved putting the phone away an hour before I go to sleep every night. And in the past 4 years, I've finished approximately 1 book. And since I started doing this, I am nearly finished my 2nd book in under 6 weeks. Disable non-essential notifications. You have a right to not be contactable all the time. And you have a right to be where you are. If you have a kid, if you have a disabled dependent, maybe find a disconnection buddy, somebody who can take turns with to allow you time away from being contactable and away from being distracted. Learn about your own biases. This website, let's just say The Decision Lab, thedecisionlab.com/biases has thorough explanation of cognitive biases, which we all have. And there's a quick bias reference on yourbias.is. I love those. They're like quick reference cards. You can look at them on your phone and remind yourself how you can be tricked and the vulnerabilities of your own mind. At the interpersonal level, we have to keep talking. Discussion and debate is the only way forward. That's why I launched truthcollapse.com. You can register there. I'm going to be publishing links, book recommendations, some of the videos and resources that you saw here today on truthcollapse.com/learn. That's still a work in progress, but it's going to get much more structured and much richer in terms of a library. I'd also love for you to tell me who to talk to next, who are great thinkers and speakers who can talk to this topic, and send me your ideas and especially your questions. I want to know what people want to know about this. Keep listening. We must repair our empathy and sympathy for everyone, everywhere. I know, and I've seen studies where listening to the other side's point of view, people describe as physically painful. We're so divided now, we just don't want to hear anybody else's point of view if it's deeply contradicting to our own. And the way that the world is going, it's getting more and more intense. But we have to listen, we have to reconnect with each other. We have to restart the dialogue, especially now when it's hardest. Interpersonally, we have to assume responsibility. We all have to become AI literate and teach others. If you're on Scott's list and you're on this webinar, I'm assuming you have some connection to this world of technology, communications, content. We cannot sleep on this. We have to think hard about potential abuses. There's a whole generative AI misuse taxonomy, and there's a link there on the slides, and I will be publishing it on the site. It's a taxonomy of tactics and insights from real-world data, and it talks about deepfake monetization, undressing services, deepfake scams, like I mentioned earlier, ways that I would never have imagined that these things could be abused. So we have to learn to say no if we are working for a company or a boss who has a whizzy AI idea who we can see a potential abuse. We have to be responsible about what we're putting out into the world. And as I said previously, we have to say no even to ourselves. Sociopolitically, we must reconnect with and repair the institutions we've created to safeguard civilization. It may disgust you to your core, but government is the only mechanism we have to limit a social downward spiral. That's how we stopped or limited or mediated the impacts of cigarettes, lead in the paint, lead in the gas, slavery itself. We said as societies to the government, you have to regulate corporations from extracting from society in this way. That is why government exists, to help us collaborate on this kind of problem. There's a saying right now, AI is less regulated than a ham sandwich. We need regulations, like an AI shall not counterfeit a human. AIs must disclose that they're not human on social media, and it is a crime if they pretend to be a human. I would argue that they should not be able to directly target our emotions by overriding our biological and psychological defenses. In the same way we talked about other types of addiction, we can put regulations on this. Using biometric sensors, my phone shouldn't be able to use my pupil dilation to drive personalization or experience enhancement. It shouldn't know things about me that I don't even know myself. And whatever else we can think of. I'm not saying that I'm the one who's going to get us out of this. Just as a fact, this is not a political commentary, but the US is currently pressuring the world to deregulate more. In contrast, in Finland, for years now, they've been teaching the children in schools how to spot disinformation. So, go to your local school board meetings, get involved, see how we can get these programs into our education systems. We're in this together. Of all the things that I've asked you to do, I hope you take some of them to heart. We will figure it out. And my last and possibly most important call to action, please be humble as a herdsman. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Noz. So we have lots of commentary about when we ask people to abuse the questions field. And instead of sending in questions, send in some commentary. So if you click on that icon yourself, Noz, you'll be able to see that. The majority of people said trust. I think if I'm looking through just with my eyes only, there's a lot of trust, lost trust, lost trust, lost trust. Yeah, It doesn't surprise you, I'm sure.
So this, I think, for me, truth precedes trust. You know,
Okay.
you have to be able to have repeated experiences of truth to be able to start to develop trust in anyone or anything. So truth collapse is dangerous in that way because it breaks down our ability to trust at all of those levels. You know, trust our own selves even. I have an example which I didn't put in the presentation, which I always think about, which is I look at my phone and I look at my photo albums, and it pops up, you know, your last trip to Paris, videos from last year, smiles and hugs with this friend. And I'm thinking, how is the algorithm choosing what memories of my life to reinforce to me? And that freaks me out. And the way that people will use filters on social media to change the way they look. And when they look at those photos, who is looking back at them? You know, that person never actually lived. So there's so many ways that truth and trust and these systems intertwine. So we had our last poll, Scott, which was us asking the group a question.
That's great. So I'll tell you, for those who had not taken the poll question is, what do you most want Noz to provide through the truthcollapse.com website? Do you want him to do audience Q&A, expert interviews curated with third-party resources, personal practical tips, cognitive science or human bias information, or other information? So far, the audience members are taking the poll, so we've got a little bit of activity going on there. So far, the number one suggestion for what they'd like you to provide is personal practical tips is about 40%. 32% is the science and bias information about human beings. And then after that, expert interviews and curated third-party resources. So definitely there's a knowledge quest, it seems, amongst this group.
So that's really cool, because I was feeling pulled to the personal practical stuff, like what can I do in my life? How can I speak to my friends? But I wasn't sure if people really wanted that. So this really helps me. I really appreciate it. And again, if you have comments, thoughts, anything you want to put in, you can just communicate to us through the questions. If it doesn't, you don't have to worry about it like being a question. Feel free to just kind of say whatever you want.
And not just that, no one else sees those questions. Only Noz and I see them. The other attendees don't see them. So there's no risk of you exposing something that you think is private to the entire audience.
Oh, thanks, Scott.
Noz, let me add something though, because I think when you and I started to talk about this topic, I'd seen your presentation, which you'd given an earlier version of this at the LavaCon conference last year, I think. And I wanted to know why you started this initiative and what plans do you have for it? What do you think you might be able to do with it?
So I started this because it had been on my mind for many years. As I mentioned, I've been working in AI, and what I saw was that we didn't recognize AI. And in retrospect, and when I launched it, I realized that we didn't recognize AI because it didn't look like us. It didn't sound like us.
Right.
So when generative AI came out and everyone suddenly started getting so excited, I thought, oh, wait a minute. We've obviously crossed a threshold, but no one seems to be concerned about what's been happening for the previous 10, 15 years. That was AI. That was AI that was learning, and it was doing things, and it was changing our experiences. You just couldn't speak directly to it, or you couldn't make a picture that looked like you. So, I go back to, we are these squishy hairless apes, and once it looked like a mirror, then we perked up and got excited. And I thought, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about what's been happening. And some good friends, my co-author Rahel Bailey, CJ Walker from Firehead, they kind of grabbed me and said, we keep talking about this in bars. You need to get up there and start talking about this to a wider audience, because people want to know. People want to hear these messages. What I got at the conference was a lot of people saying that they were kind of seeing something that they knew, but didn't really have a way to put it in words or a model to connect it to. And that's always been kind of my thing, is helping people get new mental models and model their domains and their worlds. So I thought maybe I can help.
I think that's a really good way to use your skills and your knowledge. I've been struggling with this myself, not sure exactly what I should be doing. Like, of all the crises that we could list, if we wanted to, we could make a long bulleted list of things that we're concerned about. I started to wonder, like, should we as content professionals use our content knowledge to do something really substantial? Like, if it's important to have air and water, which apparently as humans it is, maybe we should be using our experiences and knowledge to make sure that people get truthful information about what's happening with the earth so we can all be alive, right? So it's like way more than a tech docs project.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point, Scott, is that what can we do as professionals? And I think that a lot of people who would be on this webinar will have some connection to being able to influence whether they're building a reliable, explainable, trustworthy AI system. The more that we erode the quality of digital content by just slapping technology over things or producing more and faster, the more we're going to accelerate this. So as you see, there's this lost trust, and many people are saying in online digital info in general. So we have to be able to be advocating for, are we building this with a really good knowledge infrastructure behind it? Like, when I ask a question, am I just trusting a language model to answer the question, or is that going to be backed by something, some structured knowledge repository that says, no, these are the facts and these are the way that things relate to each other? We've seen over and over and over again how when you build them that way, the results are vastly, I'm talking like hundreds and hundreds of percent better, more accurate, and things like that. So a lot of the things we've been talking about for years, structuring our knowledge, tagging our knowledge, getting rid of, archiving old, obsolete, contradictory junk, and all those practices will help with ensuring quality in an AI-powered world. And also, I'm advocating a lot for not using AI. We're so focused on the end of, like, ship it, create it, put a chatbot on it at the end of the process. And I'm advocating for using AI more as a thinking, brainstorming, and collaborating tool. Help me analyze customer experience. Help me plan. Help me know what I know and look at what I know about my customer, so I'm optimizing for the right experience. How can I build trust if I don't know where the problems are? Where are the breakdowns in communication today? And AI can help in all of that earlier stuff as well. And I think that's really a very powerful tool.
I think you're right. Elizabeth said that sudden hallucinations, she needed to have deep understanding in order to identify misinformation, which made her wonder what hallucinations might she have missed because she didn't have that understanding.
Exactly.
The challenges we need to be able to help other humans understand what's going on, so they understand how that technology could be used to manipulate them, for example.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. So I have to know so much. And I think that's what's always happened with new technologies and business models. Like, it's buyer beware. We as a consumer have to protect ourselves from misinformation. We as a consumer have to know that all of the sourcing and the manufacturing practices. We have to vote with our dollars and say, okay, well, I'm not going to buy this shoe because it's made by a company that does this and sources their material. Nobody can do that. Nobody can know all that stuff. And it's the same thing with AI. Like, if I'm looking at a news report about what's happening in another country, how am I supposed to know what is hallucination, what is misinformation, et cetera? So I think that undermines our trust in ourselves. How do I know that what I know or what I'm already believing is true? My own mother shares with me stories sometimes that have been forwarded on a WhatsApp group. And I go, Mom, if it doesn't have a link, please never send it. Don't even read it. If it doesn't have a way for you to link it back to some sort of authority, some sort of institution, then that's immediately something you need to drop. Right underneath Elizabeth, Kristen Murray Todd has said, there's a loss of trust in the sources. And that's one of the biggest problems with truth collapse. We don't have institutions that we trust anymore. We're losing trust in the government. We're losing trust in journalism. We're losing trust in universities and educational institutions. And when you can use AI to create a fake research portal that looks just as good as the real ones, how do we navigate that world? I don't have all the answers, but these are the right questions. We have information overload, we have intentional misuse, and then we have this general inversion where, if it came from a government, it came from a scientist, a lot of people are trusting that less than the post they saw on Facebook or Truth Social. So that's part of this problem.
Well, this problem is not going away today, so we're going to have a lot of work to do in the future. I really appreciate you sharing everything that you did. I know the audience was super engaged. Thank you, audience members, for participating in the Q&A and sharing your comments about what you're most concerned about. Know that you are not crazy. These are like all the same things that we're hearing from everybody when we talk about these issues. What else could people do as a kicker to get out of here? What can they do next? The
one I really like here, is there a way to know what are the sources behind the giants? Google AI, OpenAI.
Yeah.
Do we just assume it's the open web? Oh, sorry, it moved and I lost the rest of the question. Oh yeah. Can you get AI from specialized knowledge bases? Well, at the moment, very unfortunately, there has been an intentional policy to promote the giants because the idea was, okay, we can't regulate everybody. So the government was aligning with the giants and said, okay, we'll just regulate the biggies, which I think is a total mistake. At the moment, if you want a specialized knowledge base, you kind of have to build it yourself. There is not a reliable knowledge-based AI environment yet. So at the moment, you can't know. And in fact, they're being intentional about kind of making that opaque. So I think that that's one of the things we need to pressure them for. Where did you get this stuff? How you have to be able to at least provide an audit trail. If I ask, provide some sort of trail to say, how did we get to this? How did the AI come up with this answer? I think that's a very good requirement.
Excellent. All right. Well, that will have to be the last word. And for those audience members that are still on the call, if you would rate and provide some feedback on the quality of the information that you heard today from Noz's presentation, I'd really appreciate it. You can find the Rate This tab, I think, or Vote here, just beneath your webinar viewing panel. 1 is a low rating, 5 is an exceptional one, and there's a field into which you can type some feedback if you'd like to share it, and I'll make sure that I pass that on to Noz after today's program is over. So thanks for joining us today for Truth Collapse, the AI Meta Crisis with Noz Urbina. You've been watching another Content Wrangler webinar brought to you by the folks at Urbina Consulting and Hereto this time. If you want to be able to share this with other people, know that you can just copy the same URL that you're using to watch today's live show and send it to somebody else, or you can watch this show again yourself on demand just by using that URL. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Noz. It was great having you here today.
Thank you so much. Please get in touch.
Excellent. Thank you, audience members. As always, be safe, be well, keep doing great work, and we'll see you on another episode of the Content Wrangler webinar series in the near future. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.